The bright sun of Xylaris shimmered over the grand city of Vorin, the capital of a proud alien world. Towers of crystal and metal rose high into the sky, reflecting every color of the strange twin suns. The streets were filled with creatures, of all shapes and sizes, moving with purpose. At the center of it all stood the palace of Queen Liara, known across the galaxy for her beauty, intelligence, and unmatched pride. From the landing platform near the city, a small human named Ethan stepped off his ship. His suit was simple, and his eyes wide with wonder. Humans were rare visitors to Xylaris, and most aliens regarded them as weak and fragile. Ethan, however, was calm and careful. He had trained for years for this mission, not in strength alone, but in observation, patience, and clever thinking. He walked through the city. Ethan noticed how differently Xylaris operated. Alien merchants sold glowing fruits, machines floated above the streets carrying goods, and children with luminous skin played near hovering fountains. The people stared at him, some with curiosity, others with skepticism. "Another human," whispered a merchant to her companion. "Do you think he can survive here?" Ethan ignored the whispers. His attention was on the arena, the place where champions fought for honor. It was said that the strongest in Xylaris battled there, and any who entered were either heroes or forgotten. He had been sent to understand this world, to study their ways, and if necessary to show that humans were not so weak as they seemed. Soon he reached the palace gates. Massive statues of past rulers guarded the entrance. Guards in shining armor stopped him, their elongated heads and bright eyes fixed on him. "State your purpose, human," one said, his voice deep and firm. "I am Ethan," the human replied clearly. "I come in peace. I wish to learn about Xylaris and its people." The guards exchanged glances. Few humans had the courage to speak so confidently. After a moment, they nodded and let him through. Inside the palace, the hall was vast, filled with tapestries depicting battles, alliances, and achievements of Xylaris. Servants moved silently, carrying trays of glowing drinks. At the end of the hall stood Queen Liara, her presence commanding every eye. Her skin shimmered like polished silver, and her eyes glowed a soft violet. She watched Ethan carefully, curiosity and pride both shining in her expression. "You are human," she said, her voice melodic but firm. "Do you know the customs of our world?" Ethan bowed slightly. "I know some, Your Highness. I wish to learn more." Liara studied him for a long moment. Her mind raced with possibilities. Humans were small and weak compared to Xylaris, yet this one carried himself with quiet confidence. He could be nothing, or he could be remarkable. "You will see the arena," Liara finally said. "There, our champions fight to prove their honor. Perhaps you will watch, perhaps you will enter. The choice may come sooner than you think." Ethan nodded. He had prepared for this. His human intuition and quick thinking were his weapons. He did not rely on strength alone, for he knew that on a planet like Xylaris, strength was respected, but cleverness could surprise even the proudest warrior. The arena was enormous, a circle of shining stone that could hold thousands. Crowds cheered and shouted, their voices echoing against the high walls. Ethan felt a mix of excitement and tension. He could see Thyros, the Queen's champion, practicing in the center. He was enormous, with muscles and armor that gleamed in the sunlight. Every move was precise, powerful, and confident. He noticed Ethan and smirked. "Another human dares to watch?" Thyros called out, his voice loud enough for the crowd to hear. "Do you know what it means to enter this arena, little one?" Ethan did not flinch. "I am here to learn, not to boast," he said calmly. "But I will not step away if challenged," the crowd murmured. Some laughed. Others looked intrigued. Humans rarely dared to speak to Xylaris warriors like this. "Queen," Liara's eyes narrowed slightly. Her champion had never faced someone like Ethan. She wondered if this human could survive, or if he would be a lesson in humility. Either way, the arena would decide. For hours, Ethan watched the fights. He noticed patterns, weaknesses, and strategies. Xylaris champions relied on strength and speed, but they often ignored unpredictability. Humans, he realized, could use that to their advantage. As the sun dipped lower, the Queen's advisor approached. "Your Highness," he said, "the human seems different. Should we prepare the next challenge?" Liara's lips curved into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Yes. Let him see. Let him learn the ways of Xylaris firsthand." Later that evening. As the twin suns set, Ethan was escorted to a quiet chamber overlooking the arena. He could hear the distant hum of the city and the cheers of the crowd. For the first time, he allowed himself a small smile. This was his world now, strange and alien, but full of opportunities. He reviewed what he had seen, thinking about how he could approach a fight not with raw power, but with strategy. Every move, every pause, every reaction mattered. Humans had survived for centuries not because they were the strongest, but because they were adaptable. That adaptability would be his greatest strength here. The chamber door opened, and a young maid stepped inside. She offered him a drink of glowing liquid, and bowed. "You are the human the Queen watches," she said softly. "Be careful. The arena does not forgive mistakes." Ethan accepted the drink and nodded. "I understand, but I do not fear learning." The maid hesitated, then left silently. Ethan looked out over the arena again, his mind sharp and focused. Tomorrow, he would step into a world where the rules were alien, and the challenge seemed impossible. But he did not doubt himself. Humans were clever, resourceful, and resilient. He would rely on these traits. And perhaps, just perhaps, he could show Xylaris something they had never seen before. As night fell over the crystal towers of Vorin, the human stood alone in his chamber, ready for whatever came next. The story of Ethan on Xylaris was about to begin, a story of courage, intellect, and the surprising power of a human mind in an alien world. The sun rose over the vast arena of Vorin, spilling light across the polished stone floors. Thousands of aliens had gathered, their glowing eyes reflecting excitement and curiosity. Today was not an ordinary day. A human, a rare visitor, was about to face the Queen's champion, Thyros, in a challenge that no one could ignore. Ethan stood at the entrance, feeling the hum of energy from the crowd. His heart beat steadily, but his mind was sharper than ever. He remembered what he had observed yesterday. Xylaris champions relied heavily on strength, speed, and predictable patterns. Humans, on the other hand, had something different: adaptability, observation, and clever thinking. That would be his advantage. A horn sounded, deep and commanding, and the massive doors to the arena swung open. Ethan stepped forward. The crowd's cheers swelled, some shouting in disbelief, others in amusement. Few believed a human could survive even a single round against the Queen's champion. Thyros waited in the center, his towering form casting a shadow across the arena. He flexed his muscles, armor glinting in the morning sun, and smiled with confidence. "So, little human," he said, his voice carrying across the arena, "today you will learn the price of overconfidence." Ethan did not respond with words. Instead, he nodded respectfully, keeping his movements calm. He noticed every detail, the way Thyros shifted his weight, how his eyes followed Ethan, and the rhythm of his breathing. These small clues would guide him. The horn sounded again, signaling the start. Thyros lunged forward immediately, a powerful force aimed to overpower the human before he could react. Ethan sidestepped quickly, rolling and keeping low, letting the champion's momentum carry him past. The crowd gasped at the human's agility, their previous laughter replaced by tense murmurs. Thyros spun around, striking with another massive blow. Ethan ducked and leaped to the side, using the arena's columns and walls for leverage. He did not fight with strength. He fought with thought. Every move was calculated, every pause a chance to observe. "You cannot hide forever!" Thyros shouted, frustration growing. His strikes became faster, more aggressive, but also more predictable. Ethan noticed this and prepared a plan. Using the arena's layout, Ethan baited the champion toward the center, where a series of glowing panels were embedded in the floor. With a careful step, he triggered one, sending a harmless burst of light upward, momentarily blinding Thyros. The champion stumbled but recovered quickly, glaring at the human with disbelief. The crowd roared. Whispers spread. The human is clever. He uses tricks instead of brute force. Ethan smiled slightly, not out of arrogance, but in quiet confidence. He moved with a rhythm that confused Thyros, dodging attacks and using simple feints. He tossed a small stone, distracting the champion. For a second, then rolled beneath a swing that would have crushed him. Thyros paused, breathing hard. He had never faced an opponent like this. Strength alone was not enough. The human was thinking, adapting, and learning with every movement. The champion growled, frustration turning to worry. Queen Liara watched from her elevated throne, her eyes narrowing. She had expected the human to struggle, to falter under pressure, yet here he was, not only surviving but controlling the pace of the duel. She felt a mix of surprise and irritation. How could such a small, seemingly weak creature have so much composure? Ethan noticed the subtle cues from the champion, muscle tension, slight hesitation in his stance, and the pattern of repeated swings. He realized the fight could be won if he remained patient and clever. He did not rush. Instead, he created openings with careful movements, letting Thyros overextend himself. With a sudden, precise maneuver, Ethan ducked under a sweeping attack and tapped the champion's knee with a calculated strike. Thyros stumbled, losing balance. The crowd erupted in astonishment. The champion, large and imposing, had been outsmarted by a human. Thyros recovered quickly, anger flashing in his eyes. He charged again, stronger and faster, but Ethan stayed, calm. He used the momentum, guiding the champion toward the arena's edge. A well-timed sidestep caused Thyros to stumble once more, his armor clanging against the stone floor. The horn sounded, signaling the end of the match. Silence fell for a brief moment before the crowd exploded in cheers. Ethan had not only survived but outmaneuvered the Queen's champion, a feat none had expected. Queen Liara rose from her throne, her face unreadable. She had seen the laws of her world proven today. Anyone who defeated a champion could claim honor. Yet she felt a twinge of disbelief and pride mixed with irritation. How could a human, so small, so different, have done what no Xylaris challenger could? Ethan bowed respectfully to the Queen and the audience. "I did not fight to humiliate," he said quietly. "I only wished to learn and test myself." HFY, maids and attendants whispered among themselves. Humans were clever, yes, but this display went beyond skill. It showed strategy, patience, and courage. Traits they had long admired in theory but rarely witnessed so clearly. Thyros slowly stood, his chest heaving. He looked at Ethan with a new respect, though his pride remained bruised. "You are clever, human," he admitted grudgingly. "Perhaps stronger than I expected, not in muscle, but in mind." Ethan nodded. Strength is not always the answer. Observation and thinking can win battles, too. Queen Liara considered the ancient law. By tradition, anyone who defeated a champion in the arena had a claim. The defeated queen and her attendants must serve the victor. The law was old, strict, and unchangeable. Yet she felt conflicted. Pride warred with reason, but the law was the law. She spoke, her voice echoing in the arena. "The human has won." By the law of Xylaris, I and my maids will serve him. The crowd gasped. Some cheered, others whispered in disbelief. A human, a creature they had long seen as fragile, now commanded the respect of the queen herself. Ethan stepped forward carefully, aware of the weight of the moment. He did not boast or demand anything. Instead, he spoke with calm respect. I am honored, Your Highness. I will not take this lightly. I only ask to learn from you and your people. Liara's eyes met his. She saw sincerity, intelligence, and a mind unafraid to face challenge. Though her pride was tested, she knew the human had earned her respect. Slowly, she nodded. Very well, human. You shall learn, and we shall serve, not as punishment, but as teachers and guides. The crowd erupted into applause once more. The arena that had been filled with anticipation now overflowed with astonishment. Humans were indeed different, and today, Xylaris had witnessed something extraordinary. Ethan, standing in the center, realized that his journey on this alien world was only beginning. He had won the first battle, but more challenges, lessons, and adventures awaited him. Today had proven one thing: humans were not to be underestimated. As the sun set over the arena, casting long shadows across the stone, Ethan felt a quiet sense of pride. Not because he had won, but because he had shown that thought, patience, and cleverness could triumph where brute strength could not. On Xylaris, the story of a human had begun, and it would be remembered for generations. The morning after the duel, the palace of Vorin was filled with a quiet, tense energy. Word of the humans' victory had spread across the city, and the people whispered in awe. Humans were rare visitors, and none had ever bested a Xylaris champion before. Now, the law was clear. Queen Liara and her maids must serve the victor. Queen Liara sat in her private chamber, her mind a whirlwind of pride, disbelief, and curiosity. She had always ruled with wisdom and strength, and yet here was a human, a creature smaller, weaker in appearance, and different in every way, who had bested her champion. The law left her little choice. You must understand, her advisor said softly, bowing before her. The law is absolute. Resistance is not an option. The human has won, and it is our duty to honor this outcome. Liara's violet eyes softened, but her voice remained firm. I know. Still, it is difficult to accept. I have trained my entire life, and yet this human, he is unlike any being I have ever faced. Meanwhile, Ethan was in his own quarters, observing the palace with careful attention. He could hear the city waking outside, the hum of alien life, the distant calls of merchants preparing for the day. Yet within the palace walls, there was a different kind of movement, quiet, measured, respectful. A maid entered, bowing deeply. Your Highness, she said, using the title given by law. The Queen and her attendants await your presence. Ethan nodded politely. Thank you. I wish to speak with them, to understand their world better. The maid led him through corridors of polished crystal and glowing panels until they reached a vast hall. Queen Liara stood there, regal as ever, her silver skin shimmering in the morning light. Behind her were her maids, each carrying herself with poise and grace. Despite the law, they all held themselves with dignity. None seemed frightened. Ethan approached with respect, bowing slightly. Your Highness, I did not expect this responsibility, he said quietly. I did not fight for dominance. I fought to learn, and I hope we can work together peacefully. Liara studied him carefully. She had faced many challengers, and most would have demanded power or recognition. This human, however, spoke with humility and clarity. Perhaps that was his true strength. You have won according to our law, she said, yet you do not demand what many would. This is unusual. Ethan smiled faintly. I wish to learn from you, not to humiliate. Your knowledge, your culture, and your people are remarkable. I hope to understand them better. The Queen's expression softened slightly. She gestured toward the maids. They will serve as guides and teachers. You will learn our ways, and in return, you will treat us with respect. Do you agree? I do, Ethan replied, bowing again. I promise to honor your guidance. The tension in the room eased. The maids approached, offering their hands as a gesture of cooperation, and Ethan accepted, careful to show respect. The human's manners and sincerity impressed them, and they began to see him not just as a victor, but as someone worthy of their trust. Over the next days, Ethan walked the halls of the palace, observing and learning. He studied Xylaris history, technology, and daily life. He asked questions, listened carefully, and sometimes offered small suggestions, always respectfully. His curiosity was boundless, and the aliens were intrigued by his intelligence and adaptability. One afternoon, Queen Liara invited him to the private library, a room filled with glowing scrolls and holographic records. You have questions, I assume? She asked, sitting gracefully on a polished stone bench. Yes, Ethan replied. I wish to understand Xylaris culture fully, your customs, your laws, your history. I want to learn not just to survive, but to appreciate your world. Liara smiled faintly. Few outsiders have ever spoken with such respect and purpose. You are not like the others. Humans are small and fragile, yet you possess a mind that can see beyond appearances. Ethan nodded. Humans survive by thinking. We are not the strongest physically, but we can adapt, learn, and solve problems. I hope to use these traits to understand and contribute, not to take advantage. The Queen studied him, her pride battling with admiration. She had expected a creature of weakness, but Ethan had proven himself clever, patient, and wise. Perhaps this was a lesson in humility for her and her people. Over the following weeks, Ethan's presence became a quiet influence within the palace. The maids taught him etiquette, history, and even the basics of martial strategy, not for combat, but for understanding the thought behind the actions. Ethan listened and absorbed everything, offering insight when appropriate. It was not long before the citizens of Vorin noticed the change. A human, small and unassuming, was guiding discussions, asking thoughtful questions, and even suggesting improvements in minor processes. Xylaris, a proud civilization, began to see humans differently. They were clever, adaptable, and capable of surprising wisdom. Queen Liara, though still proud, found herself reflecting on the human's lessons. His victory in the arena had been more than physical. It had been a demonstration of intellect, patience, and strategic thinking. These were traits the Queen respected deeply. One evening, as Ethan walked through the palace gardens, Liara joined him. The twin moons of Xylaris reflected in the crystalline fountains, casting soft light across the flowers and pathways. You have changed the palace in small ways, she said quietly. Not with force, but with thought. It is unusual, and yet I find it admirable. Ethan smiled politely. I only wish to learn, Your Highness, and to understand your people. There is much wisdom here, and I hope to honor it in my actions. Liara considered him in silence. She realized that humans, small and different as they were, could teach lessons that strength alone could not. Perhaps this human's victory was not just a matter of chance. It was proof of a truth that had been overlooked. Intellect, patience, and adaptability could shape outcomes as much as power. The law has brought you here, Liara said softly. And yet I feel that it is not punishment or shame that defines this moment. It is learning, perhaps even friendship. Ethan nodded, understanding the depth of her words. He had come to Xylaris as a visitor, a learner, and a challenger. Now he was becoming something more, a bridge between humans and aliens, a living example of the surprising strength of the human mind. The night deepened, and the palace grew quiet. Ethan walked alone for a moment, looking out at the city below. Thousands of eyes had watched him in the arena, and thousands more would speak of this day. Yet he knew that this was only the beginning. The arena had tested his body and mind, but the real challenge was building trust, understanding, and respect in a world that had never truly known humans. As he turned back toward the palace, he felt a quiet confidence. Humans had survived not because they were the strongest, but because they could think, adapt, and persevere. On Zelaris, this truth had been proven for all to see, and Ethan was ready for the next step of his journey. The days passed slowly in the palace of Vorin, but for Ethan, each one was filled with discovery. As the human who had defeated the Queen's champion, he was not treated as a mere visitor. Queen Liara and her maids guided him through the daily life of Zelaris, teaching him their customs, their history, and even the skills that had made their champions so strong. Ethan walked through the grand halls each morning, observing the flowing streams of glowing energy that powered the palace. Servants moved silently, carrying trays of floating objects, while scholars and strategists studied intricate patterns of light projected on crystal panels. Every detail fascinated him. Humans had never seen such technology or such a culture, so connected to both beauty and precision. Queen Liara herself often accompanied him, sitting beside him in the private chambers to explain laws, traditions, and the subtle ways of Zelaris society. "Our people value strength, skill, and honor," she said one morning as they walked along the palace terraces. "But wisdom, patience, and understanding are also important. Few outsiders recognize this." Ethan listened carefully, nodding. "That is what I hope to learn, Your Highness. Humans survive not by being the strongest, but by observing, understanding, and adapting. Perhaps there is a lesson in that for both of us." Liara regarded him thoughtfully. His words were simple, yet they carried depth. She had faced countless warriors and diplomats, but few had impressed her with both clarity and humility. "You may be small, human," she said, "but you see more than most of us. That is a rare gift." Over the next few weeks, the palace became a place of shared learning. The maids taught Ethan the art of Zelaris etiquette, how to move with grace, speak with precision, and even how to anticipate the needs of others. They demonstrated martial techniques, not for fighting, but for understanding the flow of energy and movement. Ethan absorbed every lesson with care, practicing tirelessly and offering his own perspectives when he noticed patterns that were different from human methods. One afternoon, Liara brought Ethan to a chamber filled with historical artifacts and holographic records. "This room contains the stories of our people," she explained. "Every victory, every defeat, every law, it is here. Understanding the past helps us guide the future." Ethan moved carefully among the displays. His eyes widened at the intricate carvings of battles and alliances, and the glowing maps that showed the movements of fleets across distant stars. "Your history is remarkable," he said. "It shows strategy, courage, and intelligence. I can see why Zelaris has thrived for so long." Liara smiled faintly. "And yet, even with all our history, we are sometimes blind to what is new. Humans are different. You see possibilities we may overlook." Ethan nodded. "Humans must. Our survival depends on noticing what others ignore. That is how we learn, grow, and adapt. It is not always about strength, but about seeing clearly." The Queen considered his words. She realized that his victory in the arena had not been just a fluke. It had been proof that human adaptability and intelligence were extraordinary. Perhaps these were qualities that her people could learn from and respect. Outside the palace, the city of Vorin thrived. Markets buzzed with activity, Children practiced with floating toys, and scholars debated in the open squares. Ethan began to notice small problems. Inefficiencies in the way goods were transported, minor errors in energy distribution, and repetitive training methods in the academy. He suggested improvements, simple yet effective, and to his surprise, the advisors and workers listened. "Your ideas are unusual," one strategist said after Ethan demonstrated a method to streamline energy flows in the palace. "But they work. Perhaps humans have a way of seeing solutions we cannot." Ethan smiled. "Different eyes see different paths. I hope to help, not to interfere." Even the maids, who had come to serve him by law, began to respect his perspective. They taught him, guided him, and corrected him when he erred, but they also learned from him. His observations and suggestions often made life in the palace smoother and more efficient. One evening, as the twin moons of Xylaris reflected in the palace fountains, Ethan sat with Liara and several maids in the central garden. They shared stories of their youth, their training, and the challenges they had faced. Ethan told stories of Earth, its cities, landscapes, and the way humans overcame obstacles not with brute force, but with determination and ingenuity. "You are clever," Liara said quietly, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Not just in thinking, but in understanding people. That is a gift few possess." Ethan shook his head slightly. "I only try to observe and act with care. I do not see myself as clever. Humans survive by noticing patterns, adapting, and learning from mistakes. That is all." The queen smiled faintly, though her pride remained. She had always valued strength, skill, and honor above all else, yet now she saw that wisdom and understanding could be just as powerful. The human had not only defeated her, champion, but he had also begun to teach her lessons she had never expected. Over time, Ethan grew more confident in his role. He learned how the palace operated, how the people communicated, and how decisions were made. He did not impose himself, but he offered insight when it was needed. Slowly, the perception of humans began to change. What had once been seen as a weak species was now recognized as clever, adaptable, and capable of surprising outcomes. One day, Liara approached him with a serious expression. "Ethan, you have learned much, and we have all observed your actions. I see that humans are not what we assumed. Perhaps it is time to test more than strength. There are challenges that require strategy, not force." Ethan's eyes brightened. "I am ready, Your Highness. I have learned much from you and your people. I wish to contribute where I can." The queen nodded. "Very well. The arena may test strength, but the palace tests understanding, strategy, and wisdom. You will face these challenges soon, and they will reveal not only your skill but the potential of humans in ways the galaxy has never seen." As the sun set, casting long shadows across the palace gardens, Ethan reflected on all he had learned. He had come to Xylaris as an outsider, a small and unlikely visitor, yet he had begun to understand the people, their culture, and their ways. He had won respect not through force alone, but through patience, observation, and intelligence. He realized that being human was not about being the strongest or the fastest. It was about adaptability, resilience, and seeing opportunities where others saw obstacles. On Xylaris, this truth was beginning to shine, and the journey of a human mind among aliens was only just beginning. As night fell and the palace lights glimmered like stars, Ethan felt a quiet determination. He would continue to learn, to understand, and to show that humans could achieve greatness not through strength alone, but through the power of thought, humility, and respect. The story of a human on Xylaris was far from over. It had only grown richer and more promising. The peaceful days in the palace of Vorin were suddenly broken by an urgent warning. Scouts from the outskirts of Xylaris had returned with troubling news. An alien fleet, far larger and more advanced than any Xylaris had ever faced, was approaching the planet. The fleet moved swiftly, their ships sleek and ominous, and their intentions unknown. Queen Liara convened her council immediately. Advisors and generals filled the hall, their expressions tense. Even the palace guards, confident in their strength, looked uneasy. This was not a normal battle. It was a threat that required not only power, but strategy, planning, and careful thinking. Ethan stood among them, quiet but attentive. He had learned much about Xylaris technology, culture, and defense, and now his human perspective might make a difference. He observed the maps and displays, noting the weaknesses and strengths of the alien fleet. "The enemy moves quickly," one general said. "We have limited time. Our forces may not be enough to defend the planet." Liara's violet eyes narrowed. "We cannot fail. Xylaris will not be conquered." Ethan stepped forward cautiously. "Your Highness, may I offer a suggestion?" The room fell silent. Many had underestimated humans, but after his victory in the arena and his learning in the palace, Ethan's opinion carried weight. Liara inclined her head. "Speak, human." Ethan pointed to the holographic map. "The fleet moves in predictable patterns. If we can anticipate their maneuvers and use the environment to our advantage, we can reduce their strength before they reach the city. Instead of meeting them head-on, we can guide them into zones where our defenses are strongest, and their ships will have difficulty moving." The generals exchanged glances. Some nodded thoughtfully, others frowned. The strategy was unconventional, but it made sense. Humans often thought differently, and this approach could surprise the enemy. Liara considered the plan carefully. "Very well, Ethan. You will lead this strategy. You will train our forces and guide our defenses. The lives of Xylaris depend on both wisdom and action." Ethan felt the weight of responsibility, but he remained calm. "I will do my best, Your Highness. We can succeed if we work together." Immediately, Ethan began organizing the defense. He studied the fleet's movements, identifying potential choke points and natural obstacles on the planet's surface. He worked closely with the palace engineers, adjusting energy fields, deploying defensive drones, and setting traps that could hinder the enemy without causing unnecessary destruction. The maids, who had once served him only by law, now assisted actively. They helped communicate strategies, coordinated with palace workers, and trained units in clever maneuvers. Even Queen Liara joined, offering her experience and leadership, yet allowing Ethan's strategy to take precedence. As the alien fleet drew closer, tension gripped the city. Citizens watched from windows and high terraces as defensive structures lit up, energy barriers hummed, and patrols took their positions. The humans' unconventional thinking blended with Xylaris' skill, creating a defense that was both precise and unexpected. The first wave of ships entered the planet's atmosphere. They were enormous, bristling with weapons and shields, confident in their superiority. But Ethan's plan went into action. Energy fields redirected some ships, forcing them to slow down. Drones swarmed to confuse others, while strategic barriers caused several to collide or lose formation. The enemy was taken by surprise, and their initial advantage was reduced. From the observation deck, Queen Liara watched in astonishment. Ethan's human mind had anticipated their moves perfectly. The alien fleet, though powerful, struggled against the coordinated, clever defense. "You have done well, human," she said quietly. "Your strategies are remarkable." Ethan nodded. "It is not just my plan, Your Highness. It is our combined effort. Humans can guide, but Xylaris' strength and skill make it work." Hours passed as waves of ships descended. Ethan remained calm, adjusting strategies in real time, predicting enemy behavior, and coordinating attacks. Xylaris' forces moved efficiently, but it was the human ingenuity, the ability to think differently, that made the difference. At one point, A particularly large enemy ship broke through the outer defenses and headed toward the city center. Ethan analyzed its speed and weapon patterns. Using the environment, he directed smaller defense units to create a narrow passage between tall towers. The enemy ship, forced to navigate the tight path, struggled and collided with its own fleet, causing confusion. Xylaris forces seized the moment and disabled the ship without heavy loss. The citizens cheered, their confidence growing. The human had shown that even against overwhelming odds, careful thought and clever tactics could protect them. By the end of the day, the fleet had been pushed back, its attacks disrupted and its forces reduced. Xylaris had survived, thanks to the combination of strength, discipline, and human ingenuity. Queen Liara approached Ethan as the last enemy ships retreated. Today, you have proven more than I ever imagined. Not only in the arena, but in life. Humans are capable of extraordinary things. You have saved Xylaris. Ethan bowed slightly. I only offered perspective. The true strength is yours. Your warriors, your strategy, and your people. Humans are small, but we adapt. That is how we survive and how we can help. Liara smiled, her pride mingling with respect. Adaptation and intelligence? Yes. Perhaps we have underestimated the human potential. Today has shown us the truth. The maids and palace attendants looked at Ethan with admiration. Their service by law had transformed into genuine respect. He had earned it not through authority, but through thoughtfulness, leadership, and humility. As night fell over Vorin, the city celebrated quietly, but with deep relief. The human who had defeated a champion in the arena had now demonstrated that humans could lead, strategize, and protect. He had not relied on physical strength, yet his influence was undeniable. Ethan stood on the palace balcony, looking out at the stars. He knew the galaxy was vast, and Xylaris was only the beginning. His human mind had shown value not through force, but through observation, strategy, and careful action. Other worlds, other challenges would come, and he would meet them as he had met this one, with thought, courage, and humility. Queen Liara joined him silently, her expression thoughtful. You have changed, Xylaris, she said softly. Not with conquest, but with wisdom. That is a lesson many of us will remember for a long time. Ethan looked at her, smiling faintly. I am grateful for your guidance, Your Highness. Humans can achieve many things, but it is the combination of knowledge and cooperation that makes it possible. Today we work together, and that is how we succeed. As the twin moons of Xylaris rose, casting silver light over the palace and the city, Ethan realized that he had not only survived, but had begun to build trust, respect, and understanding between humans and aliens. The arena had been the first test, the palace had been the second, and now the real proof of human ingenuity had been seen by all. The story of a human on Xylaris had grown richer. He had won respect not through strength, but through cleverness, patience, and humility. And as the stars sparkled above, Ethan knew that more adventures, challenges, and lessons awaited him, but he was ready. Humans could adapt, think, and survive in ways others often underestimated. And Xylaris had learned that truth firsthand. The city of Vorin rested under the soft glow of its twin moons, calm for the first time in days. The alien fleet had been pushed back, the palace and its people were safe, and a new understanding had begun to form between humans and Xylaris. Ethan stood on the balcony of the palace, looking over the city, thinking about all that had happened. He had arrived as a visitor, a small human in a world that saw his species as weak. He had faced the Queen's champion, survived, and earned respect. He had learned the ways of Xylaris, its history, its laws, and its people. And when danger threatened, he had applied human ingenuity and strategy to save the planet. he realized that this journey was not about proving strength. It was about showing the power of observation, patience, and intelligence. Queen Liara joined him silently. Her silver skin shimmered in the moonlight, and her eyes reflected pride and admiration. "Ethan," she said softly, "you have done more than I could have imagined. You have changed not only the palace, but the perception of humans across." "Zelaris," Ethan shook his head slightly. "I have only done what humans do naturally. We adapt, we think, and we learn from every situation. The true strength lies in cooperation. Your people, your warriors, and your guidance made the difference." Liara smiled faintly. "Still, few outsiders could have accomplished what you did. You have proven that intelligence and creativity are as valuable as strength and skill. Perhaps even more so." Ethan looked down at the city below. The streets were quiet now, but he could see citizens moving carefully, some whispering his name, some nodding with respect. Humans had always survived by understanding, and now Xylaris had witnessed that firsthand. The maids approached, their expressions respectful yet warm. They had once served him only because the law demanded it, but now their service was different. They offered guidance, advice, and friendship. Ethan acknowledged each of them with a small nod, understanding that trust had replaced obligation. "Your Highness," one maid said quietly to the Queen, "the human has taught us much. His perspective, his patience, and his ideas have changed the palace for the better." Liara nodded. "Yes, and perhaps the galaxy will learn the same." She turned to Ethan. "You have won more than a duel. You have won respect, trust, and friendship. That is a rare achievement anywhere." Ethan smiled faintly. "I only hope that humans and Xylaris can continue to learn from each other. There is much wisdom here, and I have learned more than I could have imagined." Over the next few days, the palace became a place of quiet celebration. Scholars invited Ethan to share his perspective on strategy, efficiency, and problem-solving. Warriors asked him about tactics that relied not on brute force, but on clever thinking and adaptability. The city itself began to see humans in a new light, recognizing them as beings capable of ingenuity and leadership. Queen Liara often walked with Ethan in the gardens, discussing the future of Xylaris and its relationship with humans. "Perhaps this is the beginning of a new era," she said one evening, as the twin moons reflected in the crystalline fountains. "Your arrival has reminded us that strength alone does not define greatness. Wisdom, patience, and creativity matter just as much." Ethan nodded. "That is a lesson humans know well. We are not the strongest physically, but we survive, we adapt, and we grow. Together we can achieve far more than alone." The maids joined them, carrying trays of glowing fruit and drinks. They had grown fond of the human, not only because of the law, but because of his character. His respect for them, his humility, and his ability to see possibilities where others saw obstacles had earned their genuine admiration. As days turned into weeks, Ethan continued to explore Xylaris, learning about distant cities, advanced technologies, and even the politics of interstellar relations. He shared human ideas, simple but effective solutions for communication, problem-solving, and collaboration. Xylaris scholars and strategists listened carefully, intrigued by the perspective of a species so different, yet so capable. One afternoon, while walking along a terrace overlooking the city, Liara spoke softly. "Ethan, you have changed more than the palace. You have changed minds. People who once doubted humans now see that your species can achieve remarkable things." Ethan smiled. "That is all I hoped for. Humans are small, yes, but our minds can reach far. Cooperation, understanding, and learning are our strengths. That is what I wish to share, not just with Xylaris, but wherever I go." Liara nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps we have much to teach each other. And perhaps the galaxy will see humans in a new light because of what you have done here. As the night deepened, Ethan reflected on his journey. He had entered Zelaris as a stranger, underestimated and small. He had faced challenges that seemed impossible, defeating a champion, learning a new culture, and confronting a massive external threat. Yet he had relied not on strength alone, but on careful thought, observation, and the willingness to learn, and in return he had earned something far greater than victory: respect, friendship, and trust. He had shown that humans, though physically small, could achieve greatness through intelligence, adaptability, and cooperation. The city below sparkled under the moonlight, and the palace towers reflected the stars above. Ethan realized that this was not the end of his journey. Other worlds, other challenges, and other lessons awaited. But he was ready, confident in the knowledge that humans could thrive anywhere, not through force, but through thought, humility, and ingenuity. Liara placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "Ethan, you have done more than survive. You have inspired. That is the mark of true greatness." Ethan looked at her, and then at the city that now regarded him not as a weak outsider, but as a friend and guide. "Thank you, Your Highness. I only hope to continue learning and helping wherever I am needed." The Queen smiled, a rare expression of warmth and approval. "Then let this be the beginning, human, not just of your journey, but of a new understanding between our worlds." As the twin moons reflected across the fountains and crystal towers, Ethan felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. He had proven the strength of humans, not in muscle, but in mind and heart. He had built trust, solved problems, and shown that small beings could make a big difference. And so, the story of Ethan, the human who had defeated a champion, earned the respect of a queen and protected an entire world, reached its conclusion. Or perhaps it was only the beginning, a story of courage, intelligence, and the enduring potential of humanity across the stars. The palace of Vorin, the city below, and even the galaxy beyond had witnessed something extraordinary. A human had arrived, small and different, and through thought, patience, and ingenuity, had changed the hearts and minds of an entire civilization. And from that night onward, humans would no longer be underestimated on Zelaris or anywhere else.